Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second session of today's Interact Amsterdam Virtual Conference 2023. Up next, we have Ronny Hendriks, Nomensa's own Head of Accessibility, with his talk, Accessibility, the Future and You. In this session, Ronny will talk about how a changing demographic legislation and the emergence of new tech is influencing accessibility and why it has never been more important than now. Ronny will take you on a journey on what it entails, where accessibility is going, and how we participate in making the web a more inclusive space. Please join in the discussion in the chat. Make sure your chat settings are switched to everyone, not host and panelists, so that everyone can see your messages. And if you have any questions, you can submit them using the Q&A functions, and I'll let you through as many as I can at the end. We're using auto-generated captions from Ref today. There's a chance some of these may get a bit muddled live, as it's the nature of auto-generated captions. But we'll make sure these are tidied up when we post the recordings on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Ronny to kick things off.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, welcome to joining us today for our webinar. The topic of today will be accessibility, the future and you. As the world becomes increasingly more digital, it's just more important than ever to ensure that all people have equal access to information and services online. And that's especially true for people with disabilities who may face barriers to accessing digital content that others might take for granted. So fortunately, a lot of work has been done, and I'm going to take you on that journey today. So what will we be talking about? We'll talk about accessibility. I'll give you a quick introduction. We'll run you through some statistics and key barriers that people might encounter. We'll talk also about the history of accessibility, how it's been going for, say, the past 50 years. We'll have a look at what's happening today and look forward to the future, and then have a quick chat about what you can do to be part of this journey, be part of this important work. So let's start with what is accessibility. At Nomensa, we define accessibility as ensuring someone is not blocked from completing a task or achieving a goal as a result of experiencing disability. Experiencing disability then becomes the question, so what is a disability? What does a disability entail? Because we want to remove those barriers, but what are the triggers or the disabilities that people might have and causes them to experience a barrier? So the formal disability or the formal disability definition can be found in the Equality Act. And it's a physical or mental impairment which substantially and for the long term has negative effects on daily activities. That's really a strong and medical definition. To bring it down to a bit more manageable piece, like disability isn't about someone's personal health condition. Disability to us is really about a mismatch in human interactions. It's about making sure that the product that you make is malleable and adaptable enough so that people, regardless of their abilities, are able to interact with it. So what does that entail? And on the screen, there's a picture of the inclusive design document made by Microsoft, which clearly lays that out into a neat little breakdown. So we see 4 different types of disabilities on there: being touch, see, hear, or speak. Those are abilities that someone might have, and that they're areas where someone might have a disability. Then there's 3 columns. We'll see a permanent column, a temporary column, and a situational column. So meaning that a disability can be a permanent one, where somebody loses an arm, or has gone blind, or is born blind. The same goes for deafness, or they might have a speech impairment. And they could have that in a state where it will never go away, or it's always been a part of their life. Second, there's a temporary disability, which could mean you breaking an arm, elderly people developing cataracts, you might have an ear infection or a strong cold and lose some of your hearing, or you could have laryngitis as a speech impairment. But those can be temporary, and they are either treatable or they will go away, and then your barrier ceases to exist. You might also have a situational barrier, where you could be a new parent, you're holding a baby, and that also means you just only have one hand available in that time to use a certain device or a certain product. You could be a distracted driver that just is distracted by some other traffic, and could potentially cause problems on the road. You could be a bartender in a loud and busy bar and have a hard time understanding or hearing people correctly for their orders. Or you could have, from a speech point of view, you could have a very heavy accent, and that might make it more difficult for people to understand you. So these are the four main areas that the inclusive design document covers, but it's still lacking a pretty big area, and that's the cognitive part. So there's a lot of this is a very wide area of accessibility, but this covers everything from being dyslexic to people with autism, or like a wide range of cognitive function capacity is covered by this. Looking at it from a accessibility point of view, referring to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the cognitive part has always been a bit overshadowed by the other areas. There's been recent additions in the form of the COGA usable document, which is a document similar to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines that lays down a lot of recommendations when it comes to making sure that your content is usable by people with a cognitive disability. And it breaks it down into very usable personas with all kinds of recommendations for that. Microsoft had recently also updated a design document specifically focused at cognitive disabilities and recommendations for that. So that's definitely also a recommended read. Which brings us to the question, so why should we implement accessibility? To just get it out of the way, our deep down opinion is it's just the right thing to do. You should be including everyone, and there's a bunch of reasons why that is the case. Overall, accessible products have a better user experience. They're easier and more reliable to use for people, and easier to understand. When a product is accessible, it needs to conform to a set of criteria within the guidelines that also ensure that it's mobile friendly. So it'll work on mobile devices with a smaller viewport. And because you're structuring your information in a reliable way, that automatically gets you a benefit when it comes to search engine optimization. A search engine like Google is like a person with a million friends. If it's able to read your page well and understand the information on it, that helps it populate its search engine. And the same goes for someone that uses a screen reader. If they are able to navigate your website well, then that helps them understand the information and the structure you're presenting it in. Another reason to start implementing accessibility is because of the aging IT-savvy population. So I'll get back to this later with some statistics, but we're seeing an uprise in people that are getting of age, and have been using IT for most of their lives now, but are running into situations where that starts causing a problem because they are developing a disability. There's the potential for accessibility to increase your bottom line. There's some caveats around that, but in the end, if you make a product that is more usable by more people, say you have an e-commerce platform and you make it accessible, then there's the potential for more people to use that product. And there's the potential that because it's easier to use, people are also more inclined to use it. And last but not least, it's not the stick we want to wave with. It's not, I think fear is a very bad motivator, but there is the question of legal compliance that is becoming an increasing source or an increasing driver for accessibility. There's a lot of countries already have or are starting to develop general laws that cover discrimination and equal treatment. And often accessibility is a part of that as well. And we'll see that in my history overview in a short bit. But yeah, most of these are already in place, and they are currently being amended by more specific accessibility regulations as well. Think about the Web Accessibility Directive that we had for the central government organizations within the EU, the upcoming European Accessibility Act for a more like commercial organizations as well. So there's more and more legislation coming that requires organizations to be accessible online. At the foundation of this all, there is the UNCRPD, or the United Nations Conventions of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. That is a piece of legislation written by the UN, and it's currently ratified in 186 countries worldwide. That's about 95% of them, I think. Most countries acknowledge that like everyone else, there's people with disabilities have the same rights, and we should treat them with appropriate. They should take appropriate actions for equal access. It's a wider piece of legislation, but Article 9 specifically talks about accessibility, both in a more general term, both for physical as well as digital accessibility. I wanted to quickly look up at some numbers for when it comes to accessibility statistics, because we often hear or get an initial response when we start the conversation about accessibility that it shouldn't be impacting that many people, or we're not aware of, or we're only aware of a small group of users that might have an impairment that impacts the usage of our products. First of all, like we said earlier, it's the right thing to do. So even if there's one user in your product that is experiencing a barrier because of a disability, you should be taking care of it. But overall, statistics do help. So since this is focused on the Netherlands, I've broken down some Dutch statistics. So currently, there are 17.5 million thereabouts residents in the Netherlands. There's just over 2 million of them live in the three biggest cities: Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague. The average age in the Netherlands currently is just over 42 years old, and adults over 50 make up more than half of our population. Within the range of 65 plus, so people that have basically fulfilled most of their working career, we're talking about 3 million people currently in the Netherlands. And as I said, they're the aging IT savvy population. So these are a key new audience for accessibility. On average, they were born in the 60s and 70s, and for a lot of their working life, they've been working with technology, with computers, with devices, and they've been doing fine up until now. The thing is, they are generally not familiar with accessibility. They've not had a disability over the course of their lives, and they've been able to do their work using tech without a problem. But due to their age, they're now experiencing disabilities. Their eyesight is deteriorating, or they start to develop physical complaints that limits them in some ability. And they're currently no longer able to use their previous tools and websites and services that they previously could. Which makes it, which causes an issue for them, because they are used to using those problems, and because they're not aware of any accessibility features that exist, they run into a situation where, or in a their situation turns into frustration, because they think, all right, I'm no longer able to participate in society as I used to. And that's a problem we can solve by making accessible products. A bit more into numbers. So when we talk about a disability, overall in most areas of the world, so whether that's America, Europe, or the Middle East, figures for the Middle East and Africa differ slightly, but in general, we can say 1 in 5 people identify as having a disability. That number rises with age. So when we get to our average Dutch pension age of like mid 60s to end 60s, depending on when you started working and how well you saved up for your pension. We're talking about 45% of the people, which in the Netherlands is, or in that age range of 65 years and over, it's 1.4 million people in the Netherlands currently. When we look at the even older population, or the older subset, as soon as we start talking age 80 and over, we're almost looking at almost 60%, so 58% of the population having some form of a disability. Like, big numbers can mean very little. The reason I put this slide in, and Elmo knows his 1 to 3s, is it's very hard for people to start comprehend numbers when they get into the hundreds of thousands or millions of people. So what I did, I broke it down into something that hopefully most Dutch attendees can relate to, since we're a nation that loves its soccer, and quite a lot of people at least know how a soccer arena is populated, and how many people they can approximately take. I've broken it down into the Dutch's largest one being the arena stadium, which currently it holds about 56,000 seats, which is still a very big number, but it's at least a little bit more comprehensible to break it down into. If we talk about the 41,000 people that might wear glasses or require contact lenses over the course of their lives, that we're talking about like almost like 3/4 to 4/5 of a whole stadium full of people requiring glasses, whether that's permanent or just for like reading the newspaper. It includes everyone in that sense. Almost 12,000 of those 56,000 people identify as having a disability. There's a difference there. Like, a lot of people that wear glasses, although technically you would consider that to be a form of a disability, people won't specifically identify as being disabled because of that. There's about 9,000 people that would be deaf or hard of hearing, or have a situation like tinnitus, where they have a constant beep in their ear. There's over 8,000 people that we would consider to be low literate, almost 5,000 people that would be dyslexic and have trouble reading. There's 2,500 of those 56,000 male have a color deficiency. Either they have trouble seeing the difference between a yellow and blue or a red and green, or there's even people that just see grayscale. And the same goes for about 140 women within that group, female within that group. When we talk about these numbers, we're also talking about 1,700 people, 1,680 people that are either fully or partly blind. Over 560 people that are on the autism spectrum, and just 112 people on average that would rely on sign language to communicate. That's about like the average statistics on breaking down various different types of barriers, to give a bit of reference. So as we can see, accessibility is really about people, and that's the important part that I wanted to drive home. It's not specifically about making there's the benefits of making a better product and a more usable product, but in the end, we're trying to solve barriers that people encounter, and that has a meaningful impact on their lives. So I wanted to take you back a couple of years, look at, before we head into the future, look at where accessibility came through. Came from. So accessibility has been going on for decades and decades. There's, as you can imagine, always been people with disabilities. And it very much differed how we treated them over the course of those decades. We've treated them very, very poorly, but luckily things are bettering, and humanity in as a whole is bettering in that regard. So in terms of accessibility legislation and formalizing accessibility and how we better take care of the barriers that are imposed on them. Most of it started in 1973 with the Rehabilitation Act in the United States. That started a lot of, that's the foundational part of a lot of accessibility legislation there. And in 1986, Jim Thatcher from IBM created the very first screen reader. And a screen reader is a piece of software that allows you to navigate a computer or use a computer, and you whatever's on the screen is relayed back to you in an audio format. So that's almost 40 years ago now that was first introduced. In 1990, the Americans with Disability Act was formulated, or the ADA for short. And after which, in 1996, the US Department of Justice declared, the American with Disability Act is about accessibility in a wide sense for the American population. And it covered things like physical access to buildings and things like that. And then in 1996, the Department of Justice declared that websites are then considered public accommodations, as a normal shop would be. So the same would go for a website, which means that under the ADA, now websites needed to be digitally accessible. And in reaction to that, in 1998, Section 508 got amended to the Rehabilitation Act, claiming digital content, or stating that digital content should also be accessible. Just like end of 1999, we see the inception of the first web content accessibility guidelines, version 1.0, where a lot of very smart and people that did a lot of the early development of the web came together and basically wrote down all of their recommendations in one go, and consolidated their knowledge into these guidelines. Almost 5 years later, Apple created the voiceover in iOS, which revolutionized access to voiceover technology for a lot of people, because otherwise people needed a computer and pretty expensive software to be able to use the software that was needed. And because the iOS devices like the iPhone got so mainstream, it also rapidly developed the support of screen readers in general, because it was built in, and then features in apps needed to be made accessible. So that spurred on a lot of early development on that front as well. After almost 10 years, WCAG 2.2 was born. It added its 4 core principles, abbreviated to POUR principles, which stands for perceivable, operable, usable, and robust. It added a bunch of additional success criteria that helped support the development of new technologies as the web developed itself. And then it took another 10 years before we had the next smaller iteration on the guidelines into 2.1, and that focused mainly on some cognitive and speech and magnification support within the guidelines. And then like about a month and a half ago, we had, after a long extension, we finally had the WCAG 2.2 release turned into a recommendation, which again adds some more support for the cognitive barriers, as well as low vision and mobile devices. So that's the history of accessibility. And I wanted to touch upon what accessibility, taking all of that history, where did that get us today? There's a lot of things that have gone pretty mainstream when it comes to accessibility that have benefited a lot of people with disabilities, but also the general public at large. So we see an Alexa speaker, for example, which like smart speakers have become at least somewhat mainstream for a lot of people. There's of course also the integrations with smartphones that serve a similar purpose. You can literally, you don't have to physically search the web for a question. You can start asking your question and you'll get an answer back in an automated way. There's also an image of a person holding a cell phone, and on the screen it says "Speak now." Voice recognition has been improved leaps and bounds over the past like 20 years. I remember when I first came into contact with accessibility over 20 years ago. I was a developer. I was building websites, and I developed repeated stress injury, and that basically meant that I at the time wasn't able to use a mouse or a keyboard or a computer in any sense. And the next slide will have another utensil that helped me in that situation. But speech recognition at the time was still in its infancies, and but I was basically forced to use it. Back then, it took me days and days to train my computer to be able to understand my voice. And as soon as I changed something in my setup, half of the software wouldn't work anymore. Where these days you could literally buy in or walk into a store, buy an Android or an Apple device, and try out speech recognition, and its accuracy especially compared to what it was before, has been vastly improved. So that opens up all kinds of different ways for people to further communicate. If you want to communicate with someone that is deaf or hard of hearing, instead of having to text them a message or write things down, you can literally speak a message into your phone and dictate it into text, and they can read it, for example. Or if someone has a physical impairment, they can use voice control to operate their cell phone or their laptop without much training needed on those components. So we've made great strides in that. We've also seen here's the potato peeler. So that's one of the things like we're seeing. This is an OXO potato peeler, which it's a black potato peeler. It comes in different colors, of course, but on the image it's black. But it's kind of unique in the sense that it got developed over the years to have a specific, much thicker handle. And the result of that is that it's become far more usable for a lot of people because it's much easier to hold, even if you have dexterity issues in your hand, like I had back then. And it's utensils innovations like that allow people with disabilities to still use those types of utensils in some way. On the bottom left, I've added in some Unicode icons. I personally think it's great to see more representation of various kinds of disabilities in these kinds of situations. Representation overall, both in it allows those people to express themselves and use those icons. And another example of that type of representation has been like the recent Barbie movie and the image that we can see on the right, where they've started including more and more people with disabilities alongside other things like people with color or like LGBTI individuals, and give a broader representation as a whole. I think it's been absolutely great. One of my personal passions in accessibility has to do with gaming, and we've made amazing strides over the, I want to say the past like 3 to 4 years. On the screen we can see various different types of controllers. So we have first off, we have the Xbox adaptive controller on the top left, and then in the top middle we can see the brand new adaptive controller for the PlayStation by Sony, which should be released in about a week or two. And then the top right, bottom left collection of images is the bottom left is the adaptive controllers from or the adaptive hub and assorted controllers from the Microsoft range. On the top right, we can see some blue attachments, basically simulating like the controls that are on top of these controls, like the joystick handles or the button controls. They are replaceable, so you could literally print whatever handle you would need, and then can attach it to the device and use it to operate it. If you put all of that together, on the bottom right, we can see two guys. One is sitting next to a table, and one is in a wheelchair holding various types of controllers. He has some motion, or yeah, he has a switch also near his head, so he can move his head left and right to push certain buttons. And he's using all of these input devices to control a video game. And then you can think, well, controlling a video game is really hard. It can be a challenge already if you're not a good at gamer like myself. I love video games, but I'm not that good at them, so I already struggle. But we've seen more and more engagements of video games making an effort to become more accessible. whether that's by allowing more customization when it comes to things like QuickTime events, where you have to really quickly react to an action on the screen, quite often by like repeatedly tapping a button multiple times, which if you have a dexterity problem or repeated stress injury like myself, that becomes a challenge. But currently, we've seen recent video games like The Last of Us and Diablo 4 that have made really great integrations when it comes to accessibility, and that allows a very wide group of people to still or to join in on playing video games. Special mention goes out to the recent release of the recent Forza racing simulator, where they've been able to, using audio cues, come up with a system where even if somebody is fully blind and has zero visual perception, is still able to race on circuits and complete video or enjoy that video game and it be fully accessible, which is just amazing feats of engineering and great wins for accessibility and inclusion in general. So what does the future of accessibility then look like if this is what we've already had? I tried to come up with a couple of examples here. On the screen, we can see the entrance hall of one of the attractions in the Efteling theme park, and the other images are there to support it. So we can see a kid wearing a PlayStation VR headset on the top right. On the bottom left, we can see a representation of something I used to do previously as a side hobby, and that's making virtual tours. So combining those three, a bit of a backstory. So my mother got sick 15 years ago, and over the course of those years, she ended up in a electric wheelchair like we see on the picture. And we actually went to this place. It's not her on the picture, but we went to this hall. So there's a attraction in the Efteling called Droomvlucht, or Dream Flight in English. And it's basically where they take you into a cart across various scenes that are very well decorated throughout. But it's really, it's not possible to join into those carts if you are in bound to a wheelchair, or whether that's so what they've done is they've made a virtual tour of the whole attraction, and you're then able to stay in your wheelchair, go to this separate entrance, and somebody will put on a VR headset for you, and you will have a similar experience going through that attraction. And the VR headset allows you to look in every direction like you would in the actual attraction, and give you the same perspective. On the bottom right, there's a logo. If you've been on the internet for a while, you might recognize it. But Second Life was a virtual world similar to what got recently explained as the metaverse. It's digital interactions like this do allow people that are bound to their house because of their disability to experience social interactions with other people. And I think that's one of the bigger benefits of having those types of environments, is that it enables people to have a more, hopefully what is to become a more natural interaction with somebody else that might be on the totally opposite side of the world. So I think there's a lot of potential there. The same with virtual tours. Like I said, I've created those in the past, and the beauty is that it allows people that otherwise aren't able to come to a specific location to be able to go there and have a somewhat similar experience, and they can be enriched with think of it like Google Street View, but then in a higher quality within your business, which can be enriched by all kinds of additional content or text information or videos or things like that. So there's a lot of potential there. Next up is the one of my personal, like one of the things I've enjoyed seeing develop over the past year or so. Be My Eyes is an app that allows visually impaired people to make a video call with somebody that is signed up as a volunteer to help them in identify visual information in specific situations. So they might be in the supermarket and want to know something about a specific product they're holding in their hands, and they can call up with a volunteer. They'll get connected to with anyone in the world that speaks that language, and they can help that person out. With the uprise of AI and image recognition, which is slowly being integrated into the app. The app currently supports a lot of already really good image recognition. So it's able to do on-screen character recognition for products and tell people what they're holding, what the packaging is reading, for example. But it can also give them a description of where they're standing in the street and what's in front of them. So that's where the second picture comes in, which you might get the reference or recognize it as a screenshot from the hacker moves in the 80s. But it's the way we use AI for accessibility. Although I have some concerns there, and we'll get to that in a short slide shortly later on. But there is definitely potential that we should leverage to enable people with disabilities to participate more in society by leveraging AI. And we're making great strides into supporting that in some areas. And there's also Lady Justice as a representation for upcoming accessibility legislation. Like I said, there's already a lot, and there's a lot coming as well. And one of those pieces is the European Accessibility Act. So that'll come into play June 28th, 2025. And it's a European piece of accessibility legislation that sets functional requirements for some key sectors sectors that are of high importance, but that also currently have a high variety of regulations across all of the different member states in the EU. It focuses on products and services offered in the EU market. And it's a piece of legislation that is very, very much, if you have a commercial product or if you fall into any of these categories, it is a piece of legislation that you should keep very close attention to. Its three biggest impact areas would be banking services, the creation and the distribution of accessible ebooks, and e-commerce in general. And for e-commerce in general, that is literally everything from buying a product online to closing a new service contract with your mobile provider using their website. So it's really broad in that sense. Every process where there's like a binding contractual agreement that says, okay, I'm going to pay for this, that is considered e-commerce. It goes a bit far to dive into that today, but I've done a webinar on accessibility legislation a couple of months ago. I've made a short URL that is bit.ly/ALLYlaws, spelled A11YLAWS. You can also use the QR code on the screen to scan it, and it'll take you to the YouTube recording on our YouTube channel. If you think accessibility legislation is potentially applicable to you, I would definitely recommend watching it. It goes far more in depth, both in the EU, UK, and the US accessibility legislations. I wanted to bring up a bit quickly about privacy for accessibility. So because we talked about AI and we talked, we're talking about a group of people that we should be vigilant about making sure that we deal with their medical information and then their disability information in a ethical way. So accessibility is about enablement, not tailoring. What I mean by that is if you make a product accessible, it means that someone can use your product using their tools. That means if they use a screen reader, that's supported regardless of the screen reader, and there might be differences in how the nuances work, but in general, your product should be then readable with every screen reader. But it's also about if they want to make small adjustments, say to color settings, or they use Windows high contrast mode, for example. Then your system should support that. Where tailoring would be creating a specific mode or a specific version of your page specifically for people with a disability, which is not the intention. It causes you extra work. It also means that although someone might be able to use your website in that specific situation, it will not work on another situation. So people with a disability that rely on what we call assistive technology, so that's things like screen readers or other input devices, they will need them for every single website. So it's better to make a product that enables those tools than to start tailoring towards specific situations. There's ethical choices and the right to privacy that also feed into the AI story, as well as user research in general. It's great to do, and I would say essential to do research or user research with people with disabilities. What I would not consider ethical is like trying to probe out whether somebody is using a screen reader and making changes on their behalf. That pulls into the privacy and also how you would then keep track of all of that data. My concern with AI, there's a definite data bias there still. Currently, it's fed on what's publicly available, where you can do but if you create your own data set, include people with disabilities in that data set. Otherwise, I mean, if you go to DALL-E and ask it to generate an image currently that involves a disability, you will more often than not end up with a more ableist focused image than with something that represents that disability well, unfortunately. And then we get to both the price of autonomy. So having people rely on specific tools like AI requires them to give up information and privacy and autonomy in general. So if that's what I mean by that is we need to be careful that AI or a specific technical implementation does not become the sole way that a person can use a product, because then people while other people that don't have a disability might have a choice in how they approach a certain situation, people with a disability often are already limited to a far narrower set of options, and it deteriorates their autonomy to make personal choices. And there's the risk of fraud, where specifically people with a disability tend to, especially if we think about people with a cognitive disability, there's a higher risk of fraud, and we want to make sure that with things like AI and voice generation, we're already seeing an uprise of WhatsApp fraud, where even with voice messages, people are asking for money and causing situations where it becomes really difficult to understand. Okay, am I actually speaking to the right person, or is this fake? It goes a bit beyond accessibility, but it's closely connected still. So again, to reiterate again, accessibility is all about people. That also means that accessibility is about you, and the future of accessibility is what needs you. We saw an image. Sorry, I showed an image on the screen that of a soccer team. They're showing their backs to us with all of their numbers, but they're all like interconnected with their arms as a single force, as a single wall. I personally think accessibility is a team sport, meaning that at every stage, in every role in an organization, it plays a crucial. They all play a crucial role in the success of accessibility. You can't have a single individual, and a single individual can't change the world. It's something we all need to do together. So, and the overall goal is to have better and more inclusive results, and that only happens if you take everyone in your team into consideration. And when I say that, I literally mean everyone. So it's not only designers or developers or quality assurance testers, but it will also include senior stakeholders, your HR department, your procurement department. All of those people all play a role in making sure that accessibility within your organization and within your application or website improves. So how do we start moving accessibility forward then? What does an inclusive, like a roadmap for inclusion look like? It's a very short summary, and all of these steps can have side paths into them, but accessibility is a journey. There's a beginning for the moment that you start prioritizing accessibility. The thing is, it's also a journey without end. So it's an ongoing thing that doesn't stop with just doing an audit and fixing the findings. It's about embedding it into processes and making sure that even if you are on this journey like 2, 3 years, 10 years down the road, then it still will need work. But it starts with assessing where you stand. So what is your starting point? What do you need to do? That often includes auditing your platform or product to set a baseline, but that's only a very small part. It's about raising awareness and getting people on board, having people understand by using numbers that I showed you earlier, or by giving demonstrations that this could happen to anyone, it could affect anyone, and it's not just about a really small group of people. It's about a really big part of the general population when it comes down to it. So raise that awareness, audit your platform, start planning remediation actions for those issues. Is always a good thing. I say progress over perfection. So don't think you need to like fix all of it in one go. Take it at a pace that is sustainable for your organization, which will show that you're continuously working on it and you're taking it serious. But it will also help you to embed and educate along the way. And then educate along the way is important in the sense that don't expect to get one training session in with your team and think you know everything you need to know. I've been doing it for 20 years and I still learn every single week. And things develop, things move. It's like any other profession where there's a constant evolution of what's possible and what we can do. So keep educating yourself. Go to come to these webinars, go to meetups. There's a lot of information online, or reach out to specialists that are able to help you or mentor you, and move from there. And the final point, document your journey. That's specifically important for organizations, I think, because I often see individuals doing a lot of good work on accessibility, and then in the end running into a wall or just getting a better opportunity somewhere else, and they take all of their knowledge with them, and your organization ends up with a big giant hole to fill again in terms of accessibility knowledge. So have people document all of their work. It also makes it more efficient to share that internally. So in the end, be the change you wish to see in the world. A great quote by Mahatma Gandhi, and really applicable to this situation. Be the person that drives accessibility, that starts that accessibility journey, that wants to make a better product, and has people with and without disability at the center of all of that. And that's me done for today. So my name has been Ronny Hendriks. I'm head of accessibility at Nomensa. We'd love to be your guide, but yeah, hopefully at least this helped you start your accessibility journey.
Thanks, Ronny. This was fantastic. What a wealth of useful information in your presentation. I love what you said about accessibility is a team sport. I really take it away. And I really enjoy the accessibility journey you have taken us in the last 57 minutes. So we have like 3 minutes left for Q&A. So if anyone has questions, please submit them now. So we have a few minutes left before we have to close the session. Otherwise, I'm sure people can reach out on LinkedIn. Ronny, if they have any questions.
Yeah, I'm just Ronny Hendriks at LinkedIn. So feel free to connect and reach out to me if you have any questions that we don't get to. You can also use hello@nomensa.com, and people will refer you to me anyways. So that'll help.
I see a lot of thank you, excellent talk. Maybe if we don't have any questions, I have one question, because I mean, you have presented us a wealth of information, and I mean, you've broken down so much of statistics, which has shown that, I mean, it's not accessibility or target group. It's not a niche target group. I mean, it's a huge group of people. Why do you think that organizations still have the highest priority on designing inclusively or making websites accessible? Why do you think this is still not on the top agenda?
Might sound blatant, but honestly, I don't know. I don't understand it, because, but in the end, it's that's because we have a better understanding of the numbers and the impact, and I think that's where a bit of awareness and empathy comes into play, when it's people that don't have a disability, or that don't interact much with people in their close relationships with people with a disability. They're often just not aware of the limitations that people run into. When I was a developer 20 years ago, we didn't have fancy frameworks, so most of our work was still done with plain old HTML, CSS, and even then, I ended up building things that, when I got repeated stress injury, I wasn't able to use, simply because I wasn't aware of it, and it took me developing a form of a disability for it to bring it to my awareness. So yeah, I think that's the main part. People think that it's a really small group, or there's just not any understanding on the actual impact that it could have.
Makes sense. I think we just need to keep up the conversations and communication, and just spread the word even more to make people more aware. We're almost running out of time, so that's all what we have for now. Thanks everyone that tuned in. We'll have the recording available for you tomorrow. So keep an eye on your emails for when it pop-ups in your inbox. Our next talk from Alberto Ferreira is at 4 p.m. in Central European time and 3 p.m. UK time. Alberto is a service design lead at Lloyd's Banking Group, and he will talk about when micro meets macro, exploring the connection between research, UX, and service design. We hope to see you back then. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.